are on children. That just makes sense. Children are just growing up. They are learning. They are not as strong as adults. They need our help. So would it surprise you to know, because it surprised me, that tens of thousands of kids all across America are being treated worse than we ever treat a prisoner, an adult prisoner behind bars, and these are kids who've committed no crimes. If you don't believe me, stick around, because we're going to have a whole bunch of survivors of institutional abuse on this show, and they're going to tell you stories that they're just going to break your heart. They've broken mine. Because, you know, I don't support abuse of adults. I don't support torture of adults. But children? Torturing children? Is there anything more cruel and wrong than torturing and abusing children? Enough of me. Let me get to some of the people that, that have suffered this and are so brave and so courageous. The person that I have next to me, Janine, I met her last year at the first Survivors Convention, and this is a woman who will tell you. I mean, you said you have stage fright, right? So,
I do.
so the fact that you're coming here on radio, that's extraordinary, and I'm really honored to have you here today. Janine, tell me a little bit about your story. Where were you placed?
I was placed in the Victory Christian Academy, and it was a reform school.
The Victory Christian Academy. Now, where is that located?
It was located in Ramona, California.
And how did you get there? Why did your parents send you there?
I consider it a kidnapping. I had a 3.5 grade point average in school.
That's very good. That's like an A- average. That's very good.
I thought so too.
Absolutely.
I actually wanted to be in a Christian private school, and my parents placed me in there. And
Speak really close into the mic.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
I had a 3.5 grade point average in school, and I was a strong Christian. I even had I Love God on my folder.
Okay.
No drinking, no alcohol.
Sounds like you're a good kid.
Almost like a goody two shoes.
That's,
I say almost.
All right. Well, I mean, look. I mean, that's great. So you're a model student. All right. And so you wanted to go to this place originally. You didn't know what it was all about, I'm sure.
The private school that I was at, that is the place I wanted to be. But I confronted my parents about sexual abuse that was happening.
Oh my God.
In the family, and they didn't believe me. And of course,
so you, I don't mean to pry, but you were sexually abused.
I was sexually abused by a family member.
By a family member, and you said, "Hey, this family member has molested me."
Right.
And they didn't believe you.
They didn't believe me. I was on the stand. I was in a trial, our personal family trial, basically.
Right. How old were you at the time?
I was 16 years old. And so the time of the abuse happened when I was 15.
And you confront your parents and you say, "Hey, this guy in the family raped me." You would think you come to mom and dad, you'd get a lot of sympathy.
Right.
And you didn't get that.
I didn't get that. I didn't get the proper treatment that I needed for that counseling. Basically what they did was they had told me they tricked me into it and said they were going to take me to a psychiatrist. And I believed them, and they took me to Ramona, California. It was a 12-foot fence with barbed wire, and It was too late. I was already inside the gate.
This is astonishing because you've been raped, you've been victimized. That in itself, all by itself, is a horrific crime for which we put people away for the rest of their lives. You then come home to your parents to tell them, of course that's who you'd come home to your parents, to say, "Hey, this guy raped me." And they victimize you further by not believing you and not trusting you. And then you're sent away to a prison camp, and you're a complete victim here. It's amazing that this is legal in America. So tell us about the camp. What was Victory Christian Academy like? So
excluding the torment that I experienced at Victory, let's just take it to the stop at the gate. I would say that was far worse than the actual sexual abuse I experienced. I feel that I was so betrayed by my parents, and then just take me to the gate, and then leave me there at Victory. That was the biggest betrayal
So they just like pushed you out of the car and said bye. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth. How did it happen?
So basically, to the point where they had taken me. Of course, when they put me on the trial stand at home, prove it. I was getting angry naturally and
Sure.
crying and
Sure.
upset.
Sure.
So, they just thought I was an out of control teenager, you know.
Even though you were a kid with a 3.5 average who's a goody two-shoes at school,
Right.
did they ever consider that maybe this family member had in fact raped you?
They kept going back and forth. It would either be, I don't believe you, you're lying, you're just doing this for attention, or my daughter's wild.
Did you have a good relationship with your parents prior to this incident? No. You
That's
didn't.
why I ended up
So I mean,
living with other family members.
if you don't mind, even before you confronted them with the
Right.
incident,
There
you'd
was
been placed. So your parents basically, let's face it, weren't very good parents.
Right.
And that's part of what we're dealing with here. Not every parent is a good parent. Not every parent should have a child. All right, so you're placed in this institution, Victory Christian Academy. How long were you there?
I was supposed to be there for a year, and lucky for me, I got out after 8 months, but the first month of being there, the damage was already done.
Describe what happens. You got to understand, very few people have been in these places, and we really don't know what goes on there. So please explain what a frightened, sexually molested 16-year-old girl is dropped off by her parents, who's been betrayed by them. What do you see when you get there? I mean, your mind must be whirling already before you even walk in the door.
A preacher by the name of Michael Palmer took me into his office with my parents and said, "You have given your parents enough trouble. You were here for a year." And they knew they knew it because they knew where they sent me, that this was a reform school, because obviously it was for troubled kids, because he specifically said, "You gave them trouble." And I said, "How could you do this to me? How could you do this to me?" And the other staff had taken me back to the showers.
And they physically grabbed you. I mean, I assume you didn't want to go.
I didn't want to go, but I really didn't put a fuss in because I knew what the repercussions would be.
You could figure that out
I
already.
could figure that out. So I just went along with the program because I knew that if I were to try to run, I would be tackled or worse.
What did you see happen while you were there in the 8 months? What happened to other girls? What kinds of abuses did you see go on?
I actually have the most horrific thing that I actually witnessed, that I actually put in a letter to Congress, is a 13-year-old girl being tormented in the name of God. By the way, please let me reiterate that this is a Christian reform school. You couldn't just do whatever you wanted. This was a boot camp / concentration camp / cult. Girls were around in a circle, and inside the circle was a 13-year-old girl with duct tape over her mouth, crying. Her hands were behind her back, handcuffed. She was bound to a chair. I thought one of the other girls had put her in there. To my amazement, it was all orchestrated by a staff member. I was horrified. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't save this girl. I couldn't go to my bunk and say, "Excuse me, I want to go read my Bible. I don't want to participate in this." You had to participate in this. You had to watch.
So it wasn't just that this girl was clearly tortured and abused. You had to watch it.
I had to watch it and not say anything, because if I said something, if I tried to help her, if I took the duct tape off of her, I would be the one in a solitary confinement, or maybe even just like her in a circle.
So what are some of the things they did? They put the girls who would not comply, they put them in solitary?
In solitary confinement.
Anything with food or shelter, or and in some of these cases, we're going to talk to some other survivors, they were locked in closets or forced on marches, anything like that?
Yes, let me back up.
Sure.
Let's go back to the 13-year-old girl in the circle, and
please.
I'll close with this. She was in a circle crying. She could have suffocated.
That's true.
All the girls in the circle were going around saying something derogatory about her.
Oh my God.
Lowering her self-esteem in the name of God. This is in the name of God. How can you slap on your title, Christian Academy? How can you do that? I just cannot believe that this is happening in America. And it's not just this school, it's many. All right, let's move on to solitary confinement. I was actually locked up in solitary confinement the first time I got there, and I was locked in there for 8 hours. A preaching tape was going on, and that's when I figured out they were abusing the girls in there. I knew they were abusing because I heard the sermons, and that to me was not Christian. I've never heard that in a church before in my life. It was an independent fundamental Baptist, and I didn't realize where the hell I was or what this denomination was until I actually got out.
And what was in those tapes? What kinds of things?
Basically, this preacher was calling the girls whores, blaming them for being raped. It was their fault.
Were you blamed for being raped?
Yes, by them.
You told them what happened? And
I tried thinking that they were rational people. No. They actually sat down and had me pray to God, asking God to forgive me.
As if you'd done something
As
wrong.
if I've done something wrong. Any rape counselor would have, I don't know, just would have went off on them.
What does this do to your brain? I mean, you're trained that being Christian is good. You're a good religious girl. You have I love God. You believe in this, and you certainly believe rape is bad. You learn normal things, and suddenly you're in this topsy-turvy world where your parents are your enemies, where the rapist is to be forgiven, where Christian people are treating you badly and asking you to seek forgiveness. I mean, how does that affect your brain when what you've known all your life is right and wrong is suddenly reversed?
Right.
How does that, did you have a breakdown? I mean, how do you deal with that?
I couldn't even have a breakdown at this place. They wouldn't even let you react. You were like a soldier in the middle of a war. You couldn't even react. You had no time to react. If you reacted, they would punish you further.
And give me again some of the punishments. So there's solitary. What were some of the things they would do?
Verbally abuse you in chapel, call you out. So in the middle of chapel, a preacher would call you out or call you a heathen. Again, the solitary confinement, standing a girl for hours, days at a time in front of a pole.
Wait, now standing, so the girl had to stand up in front of a pole?
In front of a pole and just...
Hours on end?
Hours on end.
It's not easy to stand up for hours on end. And what happens if she wanted to sit down?
Solitary confinement or other punishments.
You know, it's interesting. John McCain has talked about the fact of how horrible solitary confinement is. We actually, as prisoners, there are restrictions on how much you can place a hardened murderer in solitary because it's seen as a particularly harmful and damaging treatment, and yet they were doing it to teenage girls.
Yes. I also want to talk about the buddy system,
sure.
too. It was the biggest form of degradation to me. When I first got there, I had to be on buddy for a month. And what buddy is that you follow a girl for 1 month, 3 feet behind. You were 3 feet behind. So it was almost like an invisible dog leash. In fact, they went a step further that if you got out of the 3 feet and fell behind, they would actually put a dog leash on your wrist to the buddy.
So it's all about control and degradation.
Yes.
Now, what's interesting is I assume your buddy was a fellow, I guess the word is inmate or
right, another student. In fact, my buddy was 12 years old and I was 16. So this is another student.
And wow, is she ordering you around now, this 12-year-old?
Pretty much telling me the rules, what to be expected, what I can say, what I cannot say. Freedom of speech was taken from me. I couldn't talk to any of the girls. I couldn't look them in the eye.
What happens if you looked them in the eye?
I would get punished.
You would get punished.
With
Things like solitary.
A demerit, solitary confinement. Demerits were, I will not look at another girl. I will not look at another girl. 100 times, sometimes 500 times.
So after 8 months, when you get out of a place like this, how does that affect you for the rest of your life? You're a beautiful woman. You have a wonderful husband. I've met him. You seem to have a pretty good life. How does what happened to you many years ago as a teenager, how does that affect you today?
I'm not going to lie to you. It's a fight. It's been 24 years. And I do on the outside, people would think I have it together. And in we have so many facets to us. In a lot of ways, I am together. But then there's a part of me that does have the low self-esteem, that does have insomnia, that does suffer from depression. A lot of people don't even see that, you know.
Do you still have nightmares about this place?
I do. I've had nightmares about this place where I'm back in behind the gate and I'm trying to get away and trying to get away and I can't get away.
And how do you deal with your parents today?
I don't speak with, I don't have a relationship with them.
I don't blame you.
I've tried 3 years after. I didn't speak to them for 3 years. I left home at 17. For 3 years, I didn't speak to them. And then, you know, I went back. You know, something happened in my life where someone close to me passed away, and I wanted to make everything right. And then I went back to them, and I tried the relationship thing. But they still continue, you know, I want to say the Jerry Springer behavior. And you can either choose to be in a Springer show or you can choose.
Luckily, as an adult, you have that choice to walk away.
Exactly.
The choice you didn't have as a teenager. By the way, how did you get out of this place?
This is what I believe happened. And then my parents told me something different. My parents said when they picked me up, well, this is Easter and it's a time for forgiveness. And we forgive you. And that's why we're taking you out. The prodigal daughter returns.
Yeah.
If you know anything about the prodigal son, that's not a very good analogy. First of all, you kidnapped me. You didn't give me any money.
Right. And I was one
wrong analogy.
So what do you really think happened?
What I think happened is, you know, I was at a private Christian school, and some of the girls that were there got placed into the private Christian school, and they must have said what was going on with this place, and I think that
the authorities came in and shut this place down.
Basically, they were spreading the rumor, which was true rumors about this place, and it probably got back to my mother, and they probably thought, "What are you doing with why is your daughter in the reform school?" Because no one knew where I was. I mean, It was a kidnapping.
So they were embarrassed by what they did.
Right. Why is this 3.5 grade point average in a reform school? So she probably got a bad reputation and then got me out early.
Janine, you walked with us at the rally, and it's amazing to me for someone who says they have stage fright and is afraid. You told me at the rally yesterday that you weren't intending to speak, and then some brave people got up and told their stories, and then you came to tell your story. I remember you didn't want to stand on the podium. I kind of made you do that. So I said, "Nope, the camera can't see you
the stairs,
if you're not on the podium." How does it feel for someone who, by your own description, is somewhat shy and has somewhat stage fright to now go public with your story? How does that feel to you? Is it scary? Is it empowering? Is it both?
It's empowering, and I will do whatever it takes to get the word out. And even if I have to climb over this obstacle of being stage fright, I will do that. I will do whatever it takes to make it known that this is what's going on in America today. This is what's happening. What are we going to do about it? Are we going to let this happen? Allow this to happen? I'm sorry, but I don't know any reform schools or teenage programs so far that have been great and fantastic.
I don't either.
And anyone who says they are, and you've got a bunch of girls, 50 of them in the same place, but one of them is saying different, you need to realize that there is something called brainwashing, and it is like a cult. And after a while, you start believing these people. And
did you communicate with your parents during those 8 months?
I had no other recourse. If it was my choice, I wouldn't have.
Right. But did you write letters to them?
I had to. Twice a week. And I couldn't write anybody else, by the way.
Only
Nobody.
your parents.
I had more rights in jail. I should have been in jail.
When you wrote your parents, could you tell them the truth?
No.
Even
if I did, we're talking about my parents here.
Right, that's true. You didn't have
let's just say I had normal parents.
Right.
Normal parents that believed me. I couldn't say, "Please help me.
They
please get me out of here."
They duct taped a girl. They handcuffed her. No.
If I had normal parents, if I did that, they read every single thing that was going on.
They monitor
I couldn't make a phone call. I couldn't dial 911. I couldn't call my boyfriend. "Please get me out of here. Please get your parents to get me out of here." Nothing. I was trapped.
And this is what I'm trying to bring the focus on. It's amazing to me, as most of us, again, would, if it, we would treat a child better than an adult. And yet in America, you have legal rights as an adult and not as a child. And if you happen to have horrible parents, as I'm sorry you did, Janine, that's not Janine's fault. You can't help where you're born. You can be completely abused. It always strikes me that if a parent abuses a child, if a parent were to duct tape a child and handcuff her to a chair or make her stand all day, you call Child Protective Services, they would come in, they throw that parent in jail. But the parent can pay someone to do that, and suddenly it's okay? It doesn't make any sense.
It
Janine,
doesn't.
thank you so much for your bravery, for sharing this story, for being courageous enough to come on the radio.
Thank you so much for having me here, and I love you for doing this for us. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that so much. I got my earphones on. So in fact, I should probably take them off. Folks, if you want to call in and join this discussion, I encourage you to do so. We're going to have a testimony from survivors for the whole next 2 hours. Many have similar stories from Janine. Some things are a little bit different, but the same theme is the same. Helpless kids who've done nothing wrong being tortured and abused. Why does this go on in America, and what we can do to stop it? There's actually a bill in Congress to stop it. I'm going to talk about that in just a few minutes, too. If you want to call in, 202-889-9797, 202-889-9797. This is Mark Levine and the Inside Scoop. We'll be right back right after this.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was so sweet.
Pleasure. I told you your story is great.
What I'm thinking about doing for Congress, just real quick, is probably having that meeting.
You're listening to WPWC.
Show this video.
We Act
Have
Radio,
a bunch of letters.
1480 AM. WeActRadio.com.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
You're listening to WPWC, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, WeActRadio.com.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. This is Mark Levine talking about survivors of institutional abuse. You may not even know this is a problem in America. If you heard Janine's story, you cannot help but be moved by it. And I wish I could say that it was an anomaly, that what happened to Janine is just one example of awful parents sending one girl to one awful place. I wish I could say that. It's not true. The next two ladies you're going to hear from were in a place called Strait that existed way back in the, 80s, I guess it was?
Early 80s.
Early 1980s. This is
80s.
not something new. This has been going on for a long time. I want to ask you both your stories. So I got Dina here and Leslie here. I start with Leslie. Is that the rule here? All right. Okay. So let me take my headphones off since we're not playing the music. And I'm going to start with you, Leslie. So now you were not in Strait, but your brother was.
Correct.
And why was your brother sent to Strait?
It certainly wasn't because he had a drug problem.
Straight is ostensibly, by the way, a drug treatment
Specific.
center, right? Unlike the Janine was in a Christian academy. This was supposedly something to help get kids off drugs.
Right. It was specific to drugs.
Talking to the mic a little bit more.
It was specific to drugs and people that abuse drugs. Although I would say 98% of the people in there, children in there, did not have a drug problem.
Including your brother.
Right.
So why was your brother put there?
Well, back in the early 80s with the Nancy Reagan Just Say No whole thing, if your child was surly or your teenager was doing poorly in school or was belligerent to you or didn't follow the rules.
I don't know a teenage kid that doesn't talk back to their parents.
Exactly. But back then the big buzzword was druggy behavior. Your child, if you could not, quote unquote, control your child, they were a druggie.
So your brother talked back a bit to his parents and was put in straight. For how long was he there? Talk to the mic a little bit more.
A total of not quite 3 years, over 2.5 years.
2.5 years?
Over 2.5.
What are some of the things that would happen to him at straight?
He was starved. He was
Starved? Denied food?
Absolutely.
Just they didn't feed him?
They didn't feed him, or if they did feed him, they had what they referred to as peanut butter diets. It was a punishment. And you would get peanut butter diets and a Dixie cup of water 3 times a day.
You would have to eat only peanut butter.
3 times a day.
And a single Dixie cup of water. You know, peanut butter makes you thirsty.
Thick peanut butter.
And this is just to torture him, I guess.
It's punishment.
It's punishment.
Not torture. It's
punishment. Excuse me. Punishment.
Right.
For not complying with the
Whatever.
program. And what are some of the things they would do in the program that he might not have complied with?
He didn't sit up straight. He wrote his moral inventories incorrectly, which is something that they had to do every night. We all had to do. Siblings had to do it.
Now, this is interesting to me. You're a sibling. You're not in the program. Why do you have to do anything?
Well, actually, as far as Straight Incorporated, the entire family was the entire family cell. Parents, step-parents, children, siblings, everybody was involved in some way or another. That's how they kept the whole cult-like process moving along, because they involved everyone. So everyone was a part of the brainwashing and their movement to make the United States drug-free.
I see. So you actually had to do things yourself. And I'm going to get to Dina's story in just a second. But your brother was there after 2.5 years. He finally got out. How did he get out?
This was not long after a very brave young man named Fred Collins sued Straight for kidnapping. He was 18. He said, I have rights. He escaped, and he sued them. And there were questions, not all of the parents were completely brainwashed. And one morning my brother spoke to my parents, told them some of the smaller abuses, because I think he knew if he told them about arms being broken and heads being smashed on the floor and stuff, that they wouldn't believe him, because it was the extreme. And my parents immediately pulled him from the program.
After 2.5 years.
Mm.
And then your brother got out of the program, but apparently the demons of the program continued to haunt him.
The damage was done at that point.
He had, I guess, post-traumatic stress syndrome would be a way of characterizing it?
He did, but, hindsight, because back in the early 80s, it hasn't been till recently that bipolar and depression and all these newer buzzwords, and I don't mean that in a bad way.
Right. People understand more about these
absolutely.
these afflictions.
And back then, there was nothing like that, and if your child was a problem child, they were a druggie. So I think along with absolutely complex PTSD, and I think my brother was bipolar, and I absolutely know that he suffered from depression, hindsight. All of that took its toll on him, and not quite a year, he killed himself.
One of the things that we did at the convention was read a name of documented cases of more than 300 kids who have been killed by these programs, some within this program, some from suicide after. Your brother's story, while it needs to be told, is unfortunately not an isolated one.
No, I have to say, because I read the names of people from Straight that have passed away, and I was shocked. I had 3 typed pages of names, and
out of all 3 pages of names, there was one person that died from cancer. There was another person that died from an overdose. Were all suicide.
On my page, they all died from some of the restraints they used, forcible restraints, where
About between 2 and 3 months.
so that's not that very long, considering, I mean, Leslie's brother there for 3 years.
Absolutely not.
And why were you sent to straight?
My mom tricked me into going there. I'm really quite not sure of the backstory because we still don't speak.
No, that's very interesting. This has been many, many years, obviously since
Yes.
the early 80s, and you don't speak to your mom,
No.
all because she incarcerated you for 2 months against your will
Yes, and
in the hellhole called straight.
yes, and it was very hypocritical of her because I was not doing drugs and she was.
And she was.
She was.
Wow. So what did you see at straight? Tell me about some of those restraints.
It happened constantly. We were in a room at least at any given time with, I'd say, 400 kids is what it seemed like.
How old were you at the
And-
time?
15. I went in at 15, came out at 16. I turned 16 in there. And constantly, I guess from the constant stress, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at any given to get a scream out or anything. And this would, until that person calmed down, which when you're filled with that much rage and frustration could be hours. And you still couldn't even, like, you hear it going on, but everyone's still made to face forward as if this isn't going on next to you. But it was constantly.
One of the things that, the extraordinary, weird stuff that goes on in places like this, one of the extraordinary things is, in order to get their attention in a regular school setting, you raise your hand. I'd like to speak. It's hard to demonstrate in these confined quarters of a radio station. I'm going to stand back. But can you show us what you had to do? Not as dramatically, perhaps. Would that be terrible to show what they made you do?
As far as motivating?
Yeah, as far as
I
motivating.
couldn't do that. It literally, like...
It would drive you crazy.
No, it would make me want to throw up.
All right. Okay.
But I would
I'll
like to
describe it.
mention
I'll describe
something
it
about
then.
the hand, if I could.
Yeah.
Like, it had to be, you know, and my timeline within there is completely screwed up, and I remember very little, but one specific thing I remember is being a female, getting my normal cycle in there. I remember raising my hand because you had to, like, put your hand up like a flag to use the bathroom because we only got 2 bathroom breaks a day, and it being slammed down constantly, like within, you know, every time I put it up, it would get slammed down. I keep putting it up because I had to go to the restroom, and I was made to sit in that chair all day in my mess.
Yeah. I don't want to cause you any emotional distress, so I'll do this on camera maybe after you leave the radio station. I'll show them what, quote, motivating was. It's basically flailing your arms pretty violently and wildly in ways that are
And
are really...
if you don't do it, they're like forcing you to do it. Like people physically take your arms to force you.
And there was a lot of physical...
Constant physical force.
Physical force. And no escape.
No.
You're very brave to tell this story, and I really do appreciate it. I really appreciate you coming on and telling the story. Thank you. Let me go back to Leslie here. You, as a sibling, were made to attend, I guess what you call meetings, family meetings? What do you call them?
Well, the siblings had to go to 2 separate kind of meetings. We had our own sibling meetings or raps, talks.
Talks. But you're not even in the program.
Correct.
How did they make you go? Your parents made you go?
Oh, there was no choice.
There was no choice. No, explain that to me, because people, you have to understand, Leslie, people who don't know of these programs don't understand how there couldn't be a choice. So you got to explain how there wasn't a choice.
If I skipped a meeting,
Yeah.
a siblings meeting,
Right, what
or
happens?
I skipped, and I went to the next one,
Uh-huh.
I was stood up as if I was in the program. We called it, the siblings call it the big room. We were the siblings, and then there was the parents, and then there was the big group, which is what my brother was in. It's what Dina was in. And if you missed meetings, sibling meetings, you could end up in the program.
Wow.
Because that's your responsibility, and that's druggy behavior.
Druggy behavior to miss a single meeting. Now, your parents obviously acquiesced, at least, if not actively supported, this kind of program. One of the things that you were telling me is that when your last time you marched in Washington before yesterday.
The only time I've ever
The only time you ever marched in Washington before yesterday, when you marched with the group to stop institutional abuse, you actually marched with a sign at age 13 to support straight.
It was 30 years ago, almost 31, but it was 30 years ago, and that same brave young man I was talking about, Fred Collins, when he was suing straight, they were, and it was at the federal level, they were at the federal courthouse in Alexandria, and we straight, we were out front protesting the lawsuit. And I was 13, little towhead, and I had a big old sign that said straight was great. And we were all walking around with our straight is great
Did you
signs.
think straight was great when you were 13?
I thought whatever I was told to think. I was 13.
So your parents told you, hey, carry this sign and march.
My parents, my friends, my brother.
It's a whole cult. There's a whole group of people involved in this.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the things that I want to point out is I actually began studying this issue back in 2005 with straight, was actually the particular residential prison camp slash, I hate to call it a treatment center because the only treating they did was violent.
Facility.
Torture facility, a torture camp. I began because the founder of Straight, a guy by the name of Mel Sembler, was actually our ambassador to Italy and to Australia under George W. Bush. He gave a lot of money to George W. Bush. He got a lot of accolades from President Bush. And he actually has been running Mitt Romney's campaign as well, giving a lot of money to Mitt Romney. These are powerful people, and they have powerful friends. And I think that's why they get away with torturing children. And I just want to let people know that one of the things that I am very concerned about, and I know everyone in this community is legislation to stop child abuse and to stop, because people say, well, how could this happen? How could the answer is very powerful people got paid a lot of money. Your parents, they pay money for this place?
Yes.
I don't know if you want to talk about how much, but it was a lot of money.
Probably my brother's college tuition, my college tuition, and if they had 2 other children, their college tuition.
All to have you be tortured, restrained.
All to lose my brother.
And of course your brother lost his life.
And the family broke apart. My parents got divorced, and and then there was me in the background. So yeah, all for that. Yay.
It's evil. Leslie can laugh about it because she's a grown-up and because it was 30 years ago and because sometimes you laugh rather than crying. But there's a bill by Congressman George Miller. It's called the Stop Abuse in Residential Treatment Centers Act. It passed the House in 2009 when the Democrats were in charge. The Republicans filibustered it in the Senate because they were against needless regulation. I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, torturing children is not something that is needless to stop. It is essential to stop in the United States of America. And one of the reasons why I'm doing this program is to encourage you to call your member of Congress wherever you live. You can pick up the phone and dial 202-225-3121. That's the Capitol switchboard. Do it on Monday. And tell your member of Congress, tell your senator, tell your representative, hey, did you know that children are being tortured and abused in America legally? That they're doing it in facilities, that parents who couldn't legally abuse their children can outsource it, that powerful political figures are allowing this to happen, and ask simply that it be regulated. I'd like to ban these facilities, but we can start at least with regulation. This is Mark Levine. We're going to bring on some more survivors in just a few minutes. If you want to dial in, it's 202-889-9797, 202-889-9797. I want to thank both Dina and Leslie for being courageous enough to tell your stories. I really do appreciate it. And I know I'll see you both again at the next convention.
Yep. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for coming in. We'll be right back with more of the Inside Scoop right after this.
You okay?
You're listening to WPWC We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com.
My name is Joe Thompson. I'm 29 years old and have a career that I love as a systems analyst. Career. It still sounds cool to say that word. I never could have gotten on this path without a college degree. And if the college me were here, he'd tell you.
I never would have gotten to college without Big Brothers Big Sisters. I could have ended up anywhere, on the streets even. But college? Joe Thompson? Not likely. My big brother helped me out. He taught me I could do anything, at a time when a lot of people were saying just the opposite.
And to a 7-year-old, that means a lot. My big brother's name is Phil. And Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child. And that can last a lifetime. Start something today at bigbrothersbigsisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
You're listening to WPWC We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. This is Mark Levine talking to survivors of institutional abuse. If you want to dial in, it's 202-889-9797. I've got a couple more that are being set up right now, sharing a microphone. Before we get to them, I understand I have a caller on the line, Michael from the Bronx. Hey, Michael, how are you? Do we have Michael on the line? Do we have Michael on the line? Okay, I'll tell you what, while they're working with Michael, I will go ahead and go to my next guest. Rhonda, you and I met, I guess, at the SIA convention last year.
Yep.
And it's funny, I've gotten to know so many of you, and you're all such wonderful, strong people, particularly after undergoing what you've been through. It's amazing to me, because your stories are so strong and so real and so powerful. We're going to get to yours in just a second. But you have an ordinary life. You haven't, I mean, I won't have to go into all the details, but ordinary job and family and all. And yet you've got this thing in the back of your head that happened to you years ago. Is that a little weird, disconcerting to go back and forth between your real life and what happened all those years ago?
Kind of, but now a lot of people around me are aware of what happened to me, and so it helps for me to talk about it. It's so my life now. All of this is my life, that it's now my friends. It's bringing awareness. So actually integrating it all in together is is made me more of a whole as a person.
Talking about it actually makes it easier.
Yeah, instead of trying to live one life that nobody knows about and all of these things that go on in my head that no one knows, and then try to be a mom and a wife and a friend. And
so let's talk about it. Where were you placed?
New Bethany Home for Girls, Arcadia, Louisiana.
And how long were you there?
I was there 1 year.
Just 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
But 1 year can be traumatizing. We just heard from Dina. She was in straight for only I should say 2-3 months. And yet that 3 months clearly has traumatized her to this day. You were there a year. Tell us, what's life like? What's an ordinary day like in New Bethany Home for Girls?
Well, you wake up in the morning and you do roll call. And we all file into a line, and they go down the list to make sure that every girl is still there. And then we would go to what was called morning devotions, where we would still be in our pajamas and sit down and have a little church session in the morning. Then you would get ready and go to breakfast. When you crossed you were 2 by 2 everywhere you went, and we would cross the street and line into the gym. And then whoever was the staff person crossing us would call out a scripture, and then we would all be made to recite the scripture. It was almost like a chant. That's one of the deepest core memories, is the chanting of the scripture that has stayed with me so long. Then you'd go in and eat. You'd go to school. You'd go work in the fields.
Working in the fields, what does that mean?
We would, they would take a certain amount of us out, and we would pick potatoes, we would pick shuck corn, anything, he would plow the fields, but we had to plant them. We had to.
Who's he?
Mac Ford. He's the owner of New Bethany Home for Girls.
So you were basically picking tomatoes in his private garden?
Yes.
That he, I guess, sold on the market?
Yes, and then we were required to wear dresses, and so we were in the fields in dresses, and the ants would crawl clear, and they would blister your body.
Why couldn't you wear jeans?
A woman is not to wear anything that pertains to a man.
I see.
And so we had, our shirts could only be 3 fingers from our collarbone. Anything that we might do, like if your skirt went up above your knee for a second, you were doing something sexual towards one of the male workers there. Yes, and the big thing was that they really used Eve to what happened with Adam and Eve in the apple.
The temptress.
Yes, the temptress. And so we became, in the eyes of at least Mac Ford and his staff, we were the epitome of Eve. And it was
How old are you here?
I'm 15.
You're 15.
But there's much younger girls than me.
And you're tempting some guy.
Just because your skirt has slipped up.
Because you have ants on your legs and your skirt's lifted up a little bit. So how would you be punished if your skirt got above your knee, or you were otherwise tempting a man in a way Mac Ford didn't like? How did they punish you?
There were all different forms of punishment. You would get either beat with the paddle. I got 86 swats with the paddle.
86 in
2 weeks before I left, because I thought it would be funny. I took the song Hotel California and I rewrote it. I like to write twisted tunes. And I rewrote it, Welcome to New Bethany Home for Girls. And it's very ironic that at the end of that song,
check out anytime you like, but
you can never leave. And that's my whole life. That has been so real to me. I don't know why I picked that song. I don't know. But they found it when they would do room search. And they found the letter. And so in morning devotions, Miss Nora.
It's a letter you
wrote? It was like a
So you just wrote something
I just
down.
wrote it, yeah.
Just like for yourself. It wasn't yours like you were playing on the PA system Hotel California.
Right.
You just wrote down a little note about New Bethany. You check anytime you can like, but you can never leave, which happened to be true. And just for writing this little note to yourself, they found it, and then what did they do?
They read it in front of everybody first, and some girls were in there, Miss Nora, that's not a poem. Which I always wondered how they knew all the lyrics to these songs.
They live in the outside world, right?
yeah.
Unlike you.
Well, so then I ended up getting 86 swats, and you have to lift up your skirt, and so your slip is showing, and bend over and grab the chair and hold on to the chair. And Miss Nora was a very large woman, and she would take the paddle and lean it so it would touch her shoulder over here before she would swing it down.
So she could get maximum.
And you could feel the wind coming as the paddle was coming through the air. And if you let go of the chair, she started over. And so as a 15-year-old girl who is being beaten by this 300-plus pound woman, I can't help but to let go of the chair. I'm almost to...
You're swatted away.
Yeah, I'm almost to hit the ground. And it was... that was probably my worst day at New Bethany, was that. But I knew that I was going home. So I was just like...
Going home?
Because some girls were only put there 1 year to 1 year. And then your parents had to re-sign you again. But legally they had kept me against my will for 3 months. And I didn't know until I got home that in the state of Louisiana, 17 years old, you're a legal adult. And I had turned 17 in March, but they kept me till June. So legally, it was...
Why did your parents put you there to begin with?
Well, I was attempting suicide a lot. I had been raped by 3 of my friend's brothers, and then instead of getting help, I was just moved to another family member's house. But my stepfather had also been grooming me since I was 4 years old. And
been grooming you?
Yes, to be a wife.
Since you were 4?
From the time I was 4 till I was 14.
Your stepfather?
Mm-hmm.
He was telling you he was going to make you his wife?
No, he was showing me how to be a wife.
Sexually.
And so when all that came out, I had gotten raped by the 3 neighbor boys also, and so I got packed up and moved to my aunt and uncle's house, and I started attempting suicide. I
don't blame you.
I just wanted out.
Sure.
And my mother called me on the phone and said that she wanted to take me to Disneyland so that we could bond.
Oh, no.
And she took me to New Bethany and left me there.
How horrible. Disneyland's every kid's favorite thing, and
yeah,
that's really cruel. So how have you dealt with your parents afterwards?
Actually, I would have to say that I felt like I had... Now I know what Stockholm is.
Stockholm Syndrome.
But
that's when a hostage feels like they have to protect or support their captors.
Exactly. And I think for the last 30-some years, I acted as if my stepfather never did anything to me. I protected my siblings. I just went about life as if that didn't happen. And I was really in denial of a lot of things. And it wasn't until I found the New Bethany survivors that I had stifled who I was. And when I met my friends and began to be able to talk about it, that's when I started growing.
And New Bethany survivors is what?
It's a lot of the girls that have been through New Bethany for the last 4 decades.
You connected via the internet?
Yes, via Facebook. We're actually in the process of moving it right now, but we've had a website up for the last 10, 12 years.
2005. So when did you leave New Bethany? What?
1982, June of 82.
So for 20 years after you left New Bethany.
30,
you never really focused on what your parents had done, the horrors that had been done to you by your stepfather, by the neighbor boys, at this place, at New Bethany. Were you sexually harmed in New Bethany?
I believe so, but I believe that...
It's hard to remember after all the trauma, I'm sure.
Exactly, and I visualize what happened, and another friend of mine has confirmed that, yes, he did take you in that room a lot. But as to the actual, I've blocked that, but I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and so at New Bethany, you talked about the New Bethany girls, New Bethany survivors. It helped you finally heal after 20 years, 30 years of pain. But did you bond within New Bethany with these girls? Were you allowed to look at them, hug them, take care of them?
No.
That was against the rules.
Contact was not really. If you created a friend, you were automatically separated and put on either sides of the room.
Friendship was against the rules.
Yeah, they called it cliques.
Wow.
And we couldn't be in cliques, and you could talk to each other, but you couldn't. Like I could have never known what Simone's background was.
And Simone was there when you were there.
Yep, Simone was there with me.
And you described something you told me about. Simone was 4 years younger than you, and they did something to her. Tell that story.
Well, I think it would be better if Simone told that story,
All right.
actually.
Then I'll tell you what. Why don't I thank you, Rhonda, very much for telling me what you have to tell me. And why don't you switch seats with Simone and let me interview her for a bit.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you, Rhonda. I am always struck by the bravery, the courage.
You're listening to WPWC, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com. Take Action News with David Schuster, Saturdays from 12 to 3 on We Act Radio, 1480 AM, and weactradio.com.
Well, for me, it's always been, you report the facts. You report like hell, let the chips fall where they may. And the truth ultimately is what's going to sort of help our society and help all of us. I don't think progressives want a thumb on the scale on the facts. They just want the facts out there. You let the facts out, and progressives will tell you, we're going to win 70% of the time. You may quibble with the percentages or whatnot, but I think that's just sort of what progressives are looking for, and I think that's where this all sort of meshes with my interest as a journalist. And my interest as a journalist is report the facts. Here's what's going on. Here's what the facts say. Here's what history says. Here are the lessons we know we have learned. And let people draw their own conclusions. And I think what's so unfortunate right now in the world of broadcast media is I do think that a lot of conservative radio, certainly conservative television, they're not interested in facts. And that's ultimately where I think conservative media is going to have its downfalls, that Americans are hungry. They're just hungry for basic information, hungry for basic facts. You report like hell, you let the chips fall where they may. I think it's natural for all of us who care, who are passionate about politics, who feel like we have a sense about the difference between right and wrong. I think it's okay to let that be part of your coverage. It's important for all of us as broadcasters and journalists. In this day and age, we have to be authentic. You can't be the person who's up in the ivory tower that comes down and tells people, now you must eat your peas. No, it's all about, we all have personalities, and I think it's being aware sometimes of our own bias, but also being open to the idea that sometimes we're wrong, but we have a dialogue, and we have a passionate dialogue, and we care about this country, we care about this community, and I think that sort of passion is what carries us through.
Hear more from David Schuster, Saturdays from 12 to 3 on Take Action News on We Act Radio.
Hello, this is Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and I want to tell you about my new favorite discovery, Yosemite National Park. I recently went there with my husband and children, and we walked the trails to see the breathtaking waterfalls, admired the grand meadows, and giant sequoias. But the future of our national parks is uncertain. Many challenges face our parks today, from polluted air and water to development threats outside their borders and inadequate funding to protect our national heritage. That's why the National Parks Conservation Association recently completed a decade-long assessment of the challenges facing our national parks, along with proposed actions that will ensure our children and grandchildren will be able to enjoy the parks as we have. Our national parks have inspired Americans for nearly 100 years. As we approach the centennial of the National Park Service in 2016, please join us in helping to protect our national park legacy. Find out how at www.mpca.org.
You're listening to WPWC, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com.
Oh, wonderful. Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. This is Mark Levine talking with survivors of institutional abuse. If you want to call in, it's 202-889-9797. Had a number of different powerful stories in the studio. I understand we've got Michael from the Bronx on the line. Michael, are you there?
You hear me now, Mark?
I hear you now, yes. Didn't hear you before. What do you think of these stories? Pretty powerful stuff, huh?
Powerful. My heart is melting and crying for these young ladies. I hope they can hear me. Can they hear me?
Many of them can. Not sure all of them can, but they'll be able to hear it on the archive later on.
Very well. From what I am hearing, first off, it makes me so mad that these institutions, instead of helping these young ladies out that were troubled from earlier incidents, they broaden or widen the injustice further by, I'm going to use the legal terms, the assault on them, the abuse, the violence, the basic federal civil rights violations that have been going on. I got to hand it to you, ladies. You are all so doggone brave to be speaking with Mark and telling your stories on the air, and I encourage you that you go national on this. This is why these southern states, these red states, are so freaking screwed up in their heads, and they got the gall to want to talk about being patriotic, got the gall to be saying the Pledge of Allegiance, saying liberty and justice.
I'll tell you, Michael, it's true, and we're going to actually have a young woman come on talk about what Alabama did to her, and these occurred in Louisiana. But I do have to say, some of these camps, they're in Maine, they're in New Jersey, they're in Utah. A lot of them are in the South. You're absolutely right about that, but not all of them. Not all of them. The first woman, Janine, was in California. So this is a nationwide problem. Again, I agree it's more in the South than elsewhere, and I'm not defending the South. But you have to understand, this is not only the South. This is a nationwide problem.
I understand, and thank you for clarifying that. The fact of the matter is, I think this is a matter that needs to be referred to Attorney General Eric Holder's office. We have a widespread systemic pattern of federal civil rights violations and clear case of physical, even sexual abuses.
Right.
And the reason why I know about this, I can empathize with these ladies, is because we've had the same crap going on here in New York City with cases with the NYPD. And I get so fed up with the subsequent cover-ups that are going on within these institutions. That is also obstruction of truth and justice in my book. So yes, ladies, I encourage you. Huh?
Let me tell you something, Michael, and we're going to talk a little bit about this a little bit on the broadcast. We have been trying, at least since 2009, to pass legislation to regulate these places because they're unlicensed. Regulators don't come in. Many of them are private. Some of them assert it's a religious right to do what they do, and inspectors don't come in. Sometimes they're shut down. They're opened in another state. The same guy, this guy Mac Ford, has had like 3 of these places. And so one of the ways to regulate them, the best way, is Congress to pass federal legislation. There's actually a bill by Congressman George Miller of California. It's